Okay, I've just started the recording and I'm going to turn it over to William.
Good evening, everyone. My SCA name is William Douglas. This is my intro to moneying class. Usually, I teach this in person. This is my first time teaching it online. So, we do have a chat built into Zoom that if you have any questions or anything, just go ahead and put it in the chat just as a reminder. But we will cover all those questions and whatnot at the end. This is a relatively quick run through. Um, it's mostly about some of the tools that you're going to need to get started, and some of the techniques on how to make certain parts of what it takes to make money. The way I do it is the way that it's been done all the way up from very, very early Celtic coins when they started actually getting away from like hack silver and whatnot and actually making coinage all the way up to pretty much modern day. Technically, modern day money is a stamped coin. So it's pretty much the same thing, just with advances in technology. Instead of using a hammer and a couple of dies, they use a giant hydraulic press and a couple of dies. So that being said, let's move on to basic materials required for die making. So, things that you're going to need to make the actual dies is going to be die stock. I use a 1 inch by 4 inch round stock. Uh, Cold rolled is preferred, but hot rolled works. I had been purchasing hot rolled for the longest time just because it was readily available and super inexpensive. Anything that's I'm in Wichita, Kansas, so we are the air capital. Anything that is cold rolled is pretty much allocated to the aircraft industry, mostly used in tooling or repairs for equipment and whatnot. So, but my local supplier for hot rolled has started charging me more, so I'm going to go to ordering cold rolled online. The other things you will need are is a mill file. You'll need that for doing your initial leveling of your die and getting all of the big deep cut marks out of it. Then you're going to move on to sandpaper. I usually use step it from 200 to 6 or 800 grit. The um, higher grits work. It makes it shiny. Unfortunately, if you get it too smooth, then your if you're actually using a transfer to transfer onto your die, it will not stick. It's too smooth to stick. So, plus you're going to need a completely flat, non-textured surface for sanding. Most people use like a porcelain tile or like a marble slab. If there are any uneven spots or there's a texture to it, you won't get a smooth finish on your die. You're going to need a scribe or an ultrafine Sharpie. That's mostly used for actually drawing out your design. Uh, Ultrafine Sharpie is generally fine if you want to make super small designs, then you'll want to get some kind of a hardened steel scribe. The circle template is usually a piece of plastic that has different size circles cut in it. That's useful for doing your inner circle and your outer circle dot rings or pellet rings. You'll need a small hammer that is mostly for when you want to use your punches. So I use a chasing hammer. Actually, this is one of my heavy chasing hammers. So it's relatively heavy, and you use that to hit your little your little punches for making different designs. Lettering in period. At later on in period, they actually used um, single letter punches, but for the most part, before later on in period, the letters were made by using different shapes of punches combined to make the letters. The other thing that you may need is silly putty or other non-sticky clay. Amazon is our friend. You can get 3 packs of these little silly putty eggs. It is absolutely perfect because it doesn't get gummy. It's not super sticky. It's great for making an impression, for checking the depth of your punches and your gravings on your die without having to actually like make a coin. So the next thing we're going to get into is materials required for making your punches. So punch stock, you can order O1 tool steel or actually like commercially available, give me 1 second, commercially available letter sets. I get these from Harbor Freight, 1/8-inch steel stamp sets. You get 36 of them in a box. I don't know how many of these I have gone through teaching my classes. Needle files, small cut files, not the textured coated ones, like the diamond coated ones. Those wear out too quick. You want your needle files to last you for a while because you're going to be using them a lot. Again, sandpaper from 400 to 1500 grit. You will need the higher grit ones on this because when you make a punch, if you have a scratch in your punch, every single die, every single element on your die will have that scratch in it. And every single coin, you'll see that scratch on every single coin from every single die that you make with that scratched up punch. You'll also need a propane or MAP gas torch. That is for annealing and hardening your punches. Pliers, that's mostly used for holding your punches while you're annealing and hardening them. Fire brick, or a metal container with ashes or sand. That is mostly used for slowly cooling down your punches to anneal them. These come already hardened, so you don't want to have to go through 10 files and 100 sheets of sandpaper just trying to shape this one punch. So you want to anneal them, then make your shape, and then harden it again. Jar of quenching oil for hardening. I usually use either peanut or vegetable oil. Peanut works really well because it has a higher smoke temperature. And to be perfectly honest, when you quench it, it's going to smoke no matter what. At least when it's peanut oil, it'll smell good. So, okay. For making your blanks, you can either purchase them. There are several places, try that again. There are several places that you can buy ready-made discs, but it's a lot easier to get the sheet metal and punch them out yourself. Not necessarily easier. It's definitely cheaper. So your sheet metal, you're going to use pewter, aluminum, copper, brass, or if you get really adventurous, silver or gold. You're going to need a 3/4-inch arch punch. It is, I don't have one readily available. I've stopped using them a long time ago. It is basically a handle with a cone-shaped blade, round blade, that you actually hit it with a hammer on your sheet metal and it punches out that disc. 3/4 inch is the common sized coin for most. This is the same size as an English penny. So this is what we make most of the time. We being most moneyers in the SCA. It's kind of become a common size coin for most of what we make. You can definitely make smaller ones. You can absolutely make bigger ones. Just remember, the bigger that it gets, the harder you have to hit it exponentially. When you go from 3/4 of an inch to a 1 inch, you have to use about twice the force. When you go from 1 inch to 1 1/4 inch, you have to hit it with about 4 times the force of the 1 inch, and on and on and on. The bigger it gets. Wood block to put underneath your sheet metal because you don't want to be hitting your arch punch into something too hard because you want that arch punch to last for a while. And then a hammer. 2 pound sledge is probably more than enough. Anything more than that would be overkill. So now, items needed for striking coins. You're going to need your coin blanks. You're going to need your 2 coin dies that you made. Coin dies, you need 2 because you have one on the bottom, one on the top, coin blank in between. You strike both sides at once. This is the super fast way of making coins, which is why it was used in medieval times. A 4 pound hammer, that is pretty much the standard of what we use across the known world. It fits well in the hand. It's not super heavy. You're not going to get super tired. You can see, bonk. You get plenty of control. It's got a good size face for striking the dies. When you get to bigger coins, you may have to move up to like a 6 or an 8 pound sledge. But for standard 3/4 inch coins made out of pewter, 4 pound sledge is fine, or 4 pound hammer is fine. And then a bolster. Your bolster is what you set the dies in. If you don't have a bolster or don't have access to one, I've seen people just place the bottom die on an anvil or something on a wooden stump. People have taken and welded a round tube, just round tube that the die can fit into, like so. Now you've got round tube. You can put your die in, or your die blank. You can put your other die in that, and then place that on an anvil or something on a stump. Weight and rigidity is absolutely what you need when you're doing this. I have a 40-pound stump, hardwood stump, and a 45 or 50-pound piece of steel with a hole drilled in it, a 1-inch hole for that die to sit in. And that is a bolster. And that's pretty much what I use. So, creating your punches. You're going to want to heat this up. When you have already made punches, letter punches, number punches, you kind of have to guess what it's made out of. If you're using O1 tool steel, you know that O1 is oil hardenable. There's also W1 and A1. Don't ever get air hardened steel for making punches or anything. You'll just fight it the entire time. So you want to get O1 or W1. I have found that the Harbor Freight punches, like the one that I just pulled out, they are oil hardenable. So they are O1 tool steel. So you want to heat that up. I'm going to minimize something here real quick so I can see. Oops. Did I just mess that up?
No, it looks fine.
Okay. So you're going to, oops, went too far. There we go. So you're going to take this. Oh, and I went too far again. Okay, I'm going the wrong way here. Okay, I think I have completely lost that. So I'm going to stop sharing that real quick. Let me get back into this. Here we go. So for creating punches, you're going to let me go back and share this. There we go. Okay. And we're back. So you're going to heat this up into a cherry red, and then you sink it into your container. Basically, what you want to do is you want to heat it up and then let it cool down as slow as possible. That will help anneal your punch and make it soft enough to be able to change the shape of it. Then, once it completely cools, you will file the surface of it flat on top and then shape it in whatever shape you want to, and you're going to use needle files for that. And there are 7 basic shapes for letter punches. And this is pretty much what we start everyone out at, is you will make a long stem. And I've got images of this on, I think, on the next slide. You have a long stem, a short stem, a large crescent, a short crescent, an O, a small triangle, and a pellet punch. Every size is based on the size of your long stem. If your long stem is 2 millimeters, your short stem is going to be half that, so 1 millimeter. Your large crescent is going to be 2 millimeters because that's the size the size of your long stem. Your short crescent is going to be 1 millimeter because it's half the size. Your O will be 2 millimeters because that's based on your long stem. Small triangles usually about 1 millimeter. Pellet punch is basically just a punch with a sharp punch with a slightly flattened point. After you form the punches, you're going to reheat them to cherry red and then quench them in oil, and that should harden them. To check that, you will take a file and scrape it across the side of your punch. If it just kind of skips across and doesn't bite in, that means that your punch is hardened. Once you're sure that all of them are hard, you're going to take your sandpaper, sand off all your fire scale off the face and the sides of the punch. If you aren't sure if it's hard enough, you will find out the hard way. You're going to use it a few times and you're going to realize that the point or the whatever on the end is starting to look kind of dull. And what that is the edge is rounding off. You won't have a very sharp image on that. Here is your long stem, your short stem, your large crescent, your short crescent, your O, and your triangle. And you can kind of see, and actually the small triangle is a little bit smaller in this image. And you can kind of see that they're all, the long stem, the large crescent, the O are all about the same height. The short stem and the small crescent are about half that size. The reason why that is because since all of the letters are based on these shapes, we'll do a B, for instance. Your B is going to be your long stem with small crescent, small crescent. Your C is usually your large crescent and a triangle at the end of each point to kind of make a C. D, large crescent, large stem, large crescent. So forth and so on. All letters can be made with these shapes. Most people don't even make the circle anymore. They just take 2 crescents and put them end to end to make the O. So, and of course, there's certain letters that are styled a certain way. As you look at examples of period coins, you'll see that some of the early period coins are very simple. It's, your A is 2 large stems, short stem. That's it. Later on, they start putting triangles at the bottom of the long stem, and you start getting these flared bases at the bottom of the A or even the I. The B, you may have a long stem, small crescent, and then they'll take the small triangle and make a little bump out on the edges of the long stem to kind of give it a little style. So later on, they actually started making letter punches as a single piece instead of having to fit all these together. That's when coining started becoming more of a production thing. So, but that's further on down when you're making stuff like this. So, creating a die. You're going to take your 1x4 die stock, like so, and you will. Your first thing you're going to do is you're going to file this. You're going to file this side and you're going to file the other side, both ends. You want to make this as square as possible. If it is not square, you will have a high side and a low side. And when you flip that over, your high side, you're going to get a really good impression on the side that's high and nothing on the side that's low. So you want to try to get it as square as possible. Once you get that filed, you're going to start sanding. You're going to take your low grit sandpaper, your 200 or whatever, put it on your flat surface, like your ceramic tile or glass. I've had people bring sheets of glass or granite or marble slab. Put your sandpaper down and just start sanding. You want to hold it as solid as possible. Otherwise, you're going to start seeing, if you rock it as you're going forward and backwards, you're going to start getting like a little bit of a hump on the edges. You don't want that either, because then you'll have a really good image right in the middle and you'll have nothing around the outside. You work up to the higher grits. You want to sand one direction, and then when you think you've got all the scratches out, you want to rotate it 90 degrees, move to a higher grit, and sand it that way. And you'll actually see if you still have scratches and whatnot on it. Once you smooth that out, you want to take your circle template and you want to scribe or Sharpie a 3/4 inch circle. That's going to be your outer pellet border. Using that same, once you have that down, that is your coin. Take your Sharpie, draw your design. You got to remember, everything needs to be backwards. Any words, if you've got words or whatever, they have to be backwards. The letters have to be reversed. The words have to be reversed. Every single moneyer out there has made a coin where they've gotten through the whole thing, or at least halfway, and they have made an impression with their silly putty and realize, I can't read this. It's all backwards. I messed up. And they basically have to start over. If you have like a lion rampant and you want it to face to the right, you have to draw it to the left on your die, because everything's going to be mirrored on the coin when you stamp it. So go ahead and you'll draw everything out. When you get all that done to your liking, you will actually take the punches and your small hammer, and you're going to transfer whatever using the punches. You're going to make your image. I generally start with my outside pellet border and then work my way in. Lettering did not start out good for me. I've always had problems with lettering. I practiced for years before I finally figured out kind of the depth that I want to go and the spacing. So that's why I always did that first. My lettering was always around the outside. That way, if I messed it up, I wasn't so far into a design that I was terribly upset when I messed it up. Once you get, and occasionally go ahead and take your silly putty or your clay or whatever and check your image and see if you're missing something. Because since you are using Sharpie, sometimes your Sharpie image and what you're punching looks the same. It's a lot easier to use the putty, look at it, make sure that everything's there before you get halfway through making coins and realize that, oh, I forgot to cross my T or dot my I or whatever. So you will want to occasionally check using the clay or the silly putty, whatever you decide to use, to check your image. Striking the coins. So you're going to have your two dies. You're going to put your bottom die in the hole of your bolster, making sure it's seated properly. If it isn't, if it isn't seated all the way in, your first strike is going to be horrible because that's actually going to seat the die. You never want to hit the face of the die. You never want to put the two faces of the die together and hit them. You always want to have something in between. You're going to put the coin blank on top of the bottom die, making sure it's centered. Then put your top die on top, hold it securely with your hand, or use metal tube. It's not period, but it's a lot easier to use if you're making larger coins and you're using a sledgehammer. You want to make sure that you grip it well, secure it. Usually you want to use a glove in the hand that's holding the dies. It helps with not getting your fingers or your skin pinched in between the dies. And then you are going to strike the top die with your hammer. And you want to try to make sure you strike it as squarely as possible. A good clean strike is better than a hard strike. You might be able to get an okay impression with a hard strike that's not clean. And by clean, I mean square. If you have your die and you hit it with the hammer like this, all that force is going to be transferred into the side. So you want to try to hit it as square as possible and get all that force transferred through the center and through the entire face. If you have a nice clean die or a nice clean strike, you're going to get a good or excellent strike coin out of it, no matter what. If you don't have a bolster, again, you can just use a heavy metal object or an anvil-like object and use the whole tube method. I've seen people take a metal plate and weld the tube on top of it and just drop their bottom die into it. That's not the best plan because if that die expands inside that tube, it's stuck and you basically have to grind it off of the bottom plate to get it out of there. But if you just hold it with your hand, you may be able to be fine just using an anvil. Next, I think this is one of my last. So, additional materials. As you get further along making coins, you're going to start upgrading stuff. Your bolster setup, you may have additional stumps, one for a sitting strike, one for a standing strike. You'll get more hammers. You'll end up with a plethora of punches. Every single coin that I make, I always find either a punch or an entire set of punches that I have to make for that coin because either all my other punches are too big, they're the wrong shape, they're the wrong style, whatever. You'll start getting into engraving. You'll start doing hammer engraving where you basically have a hammer chisel or a chisel shaped object and then a small hammer like the one that I was using for my lettering. Or you'll do push engraving. This is a push engraver or a push graver. It fits in your hand like so, and you basically hold it and you cut your die away. It's really good for making very ornate images on your die. I would show you the one I'm working on right now, but it's a secret. For push graving, the first thing I did was use it for engraving the circle for my pellet borders because you can actually engrave that circle. And then when you go to put your punch down, you'll actually feel it drop into that engraved line. And then you can move it to wherever you want to move it and then hit it and then take it out and drop it into that line and move it over next to that previous pellet. Makes a really nice tight circle. for people that have joint problems or grip problems, it's an auto punch. Basically, you put that down, you push down. Once it, I don't have anything great to demonstrate it on. Um, Once it goes down past a certain point, it slips past a spring and it hammers it into the steel. Here we go. So, say this is your die. You can push it in and it'll make a click and it'll make a little hole or a divot. That's kind of something that I figured out for people that had grip problems. Doing your pellet circles is the most intensive part because it's a bunch of little dots side by side all the way around. And when I started out, I got really ambitious and started doing double pellet borders and then inner borders and so forth and so on. Other things, instead of using an arch punch, you can get a punch set, metal sleeves for holding your dies, magnifying headsets so you can get a really close view on your piece. There's some of these that have not just one flip down lens, but a second one for super magnification, built-in lights, all the fun stuff. As you get further on, when you're doing engraving and whatnot, you can get magnifiers like microscopes, pneumatic engravers. I'm basically listing off stuff that I have around me. So you'll get more and more stuff as you go along, but you'll always go back to the box of punches and the hammer to get a lot of your elements on your die. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think I've got any more slides. I do not. So let us look, see what we have in the chat here. I guess I can stop screen sharing now. So let's see. Stop share. There we go. Okay. So the difference between cold rolled and hot rolled. So cold rolled steel, which is what this is. Cold rolled, or I'm sorry, hot rolled steel, which is what this is because it's got the black scale on the outside. Hot rolled is formed when it's hot, and then it's just chucked off into the side, off to the side to normalize and cool. Now, since they mostly throw them into a pile all together, they kind of cool down slowly. So this is already annealed. It's already a soft steel. But it also, when they roll it out, it's an inch. But when it cools down, it shrinks and contracts a little bit. So it is not exactly an inch when you get it. Cold rolled is formed completely cold. It goes through rollers and it stretches it and shrinks it and rolls it out to 1 inch. And there is no cooling down or heating up or anything. So it retains its hardness. So like 1080 hot cold rolled steel is a relatively hard steel, and but it's not like super hard. It's not tool steel. So you can still engrave it and punch it, but you don't have to worry about it deforming when you're making a lot of coins with it. I have been using hot rolled the whole time because the majority of my coin runs are 100, 200, maybe 500. I've done a few 2,000-3,000 runs, and when you are doing that many, I don't know if you can see that very well. You can kind of see it's flared out, and there's quite a few little cracks around the edges. And there's a little chunk right here where I missed it and kind of chipped the edge. But there's quite a few little cracks along the edge. This one, I think I did about 600 with this die. and I have filed the edges a couple times during that to keep it from splitting really hard. The more you do, the more pronounced that flare is going to be. Oh, there's a good one. There you go. That's a top die. This one, oh, okay. This one's got about 1,200 strikes on it. I think I ground this down once before. You can see right here, I missed a couple times. There's a chunk. Um, you can kind of see there's some hammer strikes on the top where I didn't quite hit it real square, kind of hit it with the edge. Um, Once it gets out to about like this, you want to grind off the edges so that those splits don't start working the way further down, because eventually a chunk will fly off of this and heaven only knows where it's going. So uh, hot rolled will deform faster, cold rolled will hold up better, but it's a little harder to punch and engrave. um, any other questions? Anyone?
Do you have any examples of like what the letters look like that have made from all of those